day 11. We got Mark 13 to 16. And let's get into it. Mark 13, we have Jesus foretelling of the destruction of the temple, which again would be fulfilled in 70 AD under the ruler... Oh man, I can't think of his name. It'll come to me, hopefully. We also have, he talks about the signs of the closing of the age and how there will be, famines and earthquakes, and that many will come in the name of Christ. So there'll be a bunch of false Christs coming, and these are the signs of the close age. And just a little word on that. I mean, like right now, I can think. Let's see. There's a guy who's claiming to be Christ in Florida. His name is Miranda de Jesus. There's a guy like in Russia or some kind of European country. His name is Vissarion, and he has like a huge convent, and they live in the mountains, and they think he's Jesus Christ. There's a guy in Australia. His name is AJ, and he believes that he is Jesus Christ. And also, he has his girlfriend or his wife, or what, I mean, I don't even think they're married, but she's like the reincarnate of Mary Magdalene. And so, this just, again, more false prophets, false teachers. And also, I think there's somebody in the Philippines, and I think he's from Indonesia. I think it might be the Philippines. His name is Ploboy. And and he has a compound there, and he's saying that he's the Son of Man, and they all have ministries. They all have, some of them have very large ministries, and these people think that they are Jesus Christ, and they have, they're literally fulfilling prophecy from the Bible, which is just very interesting, because again, I've said this before, you don't see a lot of other incarnates of other, you don't see a lot of popularity from other religious sects of them being incarnates of some other old, religious figure, religious movement, but they fulfill what Christ has said. So I think that should definitely give us some evidence as to the truth that what Jesus has said. And also he starts talking about the abomination that causes desolation. Now, depending on your eschatology, which is what you believe, how the end of the world and how the end of the world happens, there's different schools of thought, and this abomination of desolation would be a fulfillment of a prophecy in Daniel where that somebody would stand in the holy place and they would worship it, and actually during the reign of King Antiochus the Fourth, I guess he had set up pagan worship in the Temple of Jerusalem. It was around 174, 165 BC, and what BC? It couldn't be BC. It had to be AD. Oh, was it BC? No, it had to be AD. Man, I had to check this out then. I think I may have that a little mixed up, my dates. But 60, 167. I'll have to look it up. I'm sorry. But there have been. I wish I would remember that emperor's name that destroyed it in the 70s, but not 1970s, but 70 AD. But there is some history, some Jewish history of this actually happening, where somebody they would come in and do pig sacrifices in their temple, and they would of course desecrate their temples. And so we do see some of this fulfillment as well. And like I said, about depending on your eschatology, some people would say that this part of the Bible has already been fulfilled, and they're either preterist or full preterist, and that all of Revelation has been fulfilled, or just a certain part of it, because there was a great persecution of the church from the time that Christ departed up until the Edict of Milan, which is like in the 300s, and so there was just a great persecution in the church, and so from that we do see there was great tribulation. I mean, Nero, he was killing Christians left and right. I mean, this guy was demented. I mean, he was killing Christians, and he was putting them on stakes, and he would have them as body ornaments in his garden. And so I mean, that's just a great persecution that we haven't really seen in all the world. So that's just some things to consider. And again, just the more warnings about the false Christ and false prophets, that people astray. And once we get into the epistles, they talk about that a lot more, about what the kind of doctrines they sound like. And you'd be surprised a lot of what kind of false teachings are out there today. And so, what else we got? Oh, and then when the Son of Man coming back, we have just the celestial bodies changing, the sun darkening, stars, just the way everything in the atmosphere that we look in the night sky and in the heavens. You know, it's going to change as Jesus Christ gets closer to coming. Mark 14. This is where a lot of the plotting and Jesus getting prepared for death. We have the plot to kill Jesus. You know, and that Judas would be the one to betray him. We have him anointed at Bethany by the lady. We also have him at the Lord's Supper, and he's going over, you know, that this is my body and this is my blood for the new covenant. We have Peter denying him, and also we have Jesus' powerful prayer in Gethsemane, where we acknowledge his humanity, and we see him not wanting to deal with the cross, and him really, you know, saying not as I will but as you will. And sometimes this life gets hard, and we have to depend on God to take us to that next place. And when we don't want to, and I think that's definitely, we get to see Jesus' humanity. He has the Passover with the disciples. He actually has the Passover with the disciples, and he is betrayed and arrested. Judas kisses him, and that was the symbol for them to take him away. And we actually have Peter's actual denial. So in the same chapter, we have him foretelling of Peter's denial, and how after he denies him three times, the rooster will crow. And then at the end of the chapter, we actually have him denying Peter to like a little girl and other people, and then the rooster crows. And also we have when they were in the prayer, the Gethsemane prayer. You know, we have Jesus teaching his disciples that to overcome temptation you must pray. It's like, watch and pray lest you give into temptation, for the flesh is weak but the spirit is willing. And I think that's just paramount to the Christian living, that's how we have to live in order if we want to, you know, stop succumbing to our temptations. Mark 15, Jesus is delivered to Pilate. He's flogged and he's mocked. They put the crown on him. They put a purple robe on him. They pretend to bow to him, and they beat him and they spit on him the whole time. And he's also crucified. And that's when he has the Father, Father, you know, why have you forsaken me? Different Gospels will say different things. This one he says, you know, why have you forsaken me? And it's not that. He said it so that way we know that the Father had been forsaken, that the Father had forsaken him, because, you know, at that time, you know, he was presented as the sacrifice, and so, you know, the judgment of mankind was on him, and so for that moment in his you know, Jesus Christ's existence, in his body, in that state, you know, in his fully human state, he experienced that disconnect from God as his judgment was placed upon him, and that's why he says it, so that way we would know that he's been forsaken. And also we have, and then, you know, there's when he dies, there's a great, you know, there's like an earthquake, and I think it gets dark, and the veil tears from the top to the bottom. I went over this in Matthew 2. And then also I found it interesting, there was a confession of the centurion, and it says, like, surely he was the Son of God. And so we have another person declaring that he was the Son of God. And Mark 16, this is the last chapter of Mark. He's raised from the dead. He appears to Mary first, and she goes tells the disciples. They don't believe, or she goes. I think she tells. I don't know if she tells all of them or just two of them. I think she tells all of them, and none of them believe. And then Jesus appears to two of the disciples, and he tells them, and they still don't believe. And so Jesus has to show up to all the disciples. It says all 11 of them were reclining and they were eating, and Jesus had to rebuke them because they were not believing in the witnesses that were established with Mary and the two other disciples. Because in their school of thought and their way of thinking, that the testimony of two people would be valid. And so they would have Mary, and then they would have so they had three people, the Mary and the two disciples, telling everybody else Jesus is alive, and they still wouldn't believe that testimony. And so Jesus Christ was getting frustrated, and he had to correct them and rebuke them. And also, again, we have the call of the Great Commission in the end of Mark 16, and how we're supposed to preach the gospel. And he's a little bit different wordage compared to Matthew 28, but essentially it's the same. This one, however, he goes into more detail about the signs that should accompany the disciple or the Christian, and how they'll take up snakes, they'll drink poison, and nothing will harm them. And you actually get to see those words fulfilled in the ministry of Paul in Acts. He displays, you know, a lot. He takes up a serpent at the end of Acts, and to show them this. And I'm not sure if anybody drank poison and nothing happened to them, but you know, we'll figure it out as we're going through it. And so, that's the end of Mark, and tomorrow we'll be going over Luke 1 to 3. And thank you for watching, and I hope you guys are staying faithful to this, and God bless.